Hey guys, it's Michael, also known as Salty Well in the Flesh and Blood community. I decided to start this podcast to focus on the Flesh and Blood investment side and also gameplay, but primarily investments. But before I go into what I know about Flesh and Blood, I want to go into a short history why you guys should even listen to me. Well, I've been involved in Flesh and Blood since May 2020. I opened my first alpha box and got a cold foil legendary. Well, I started off as a player, then I turned into a collector, which decided to, hey, I want to foil out my set. That involved getting three of each rainbow foil, common, rare, super rare, and majestics. But once I did that, I decided, hey, why not get three of each cold foil? And then a few months later, I bought a big binder. I actually had 12 sleeves per page. Then I was like, all right, well, I got to have 12 of each cold foil. So yes, I got addicted. Sometimes I end up with more cards than my pages could fit, and then I'd use that as my rule of thumb of what I'm willing to keep versus willing to sell. So sometimes I'd sell my extras, and I'd use that to help fill in some other cold foils I was missing to help complete sets or the 12 of on the page. Or I'd use that to buy more boxes of the next set. I'll go into more details of the story of my buying, flipping, investing, and rebuying in a later podcast. But today I want to focus on the current state of the game and talk more about Tails. Um, Tails boxes are a little bit lower than I was expecting at release. I was thinking about 150 to 200, partially because of the pre-sales that were going on from Channel Fireball and other places. But right now, boxes are about 120, which is still a really good value out the gate. That encourages a lot of people to buy and open the boxes, which is great. Legendaries are about 300 right now, and you got a Fable at 500. So from a financial perspective, yeah, this is not as high as Crucible War, but Crucible War was $80 to $100 a box at release, and the cards were not that expensive either. Once they went out of print, that's when the value started going up. And this helps get people who are rewarded for buying right now. Is you buy a first edition, you open the packs, you get your cold foils, you build your setup, and then eventually later, when it's out of print, it could be worth a lot more. Um, but I know people are also complaining because prices were super high back in May. So people, what I mean is people on Flesh and Blood Facebook, might have people on YouTube. But I find that a little short-sighted sometimes because if you go back a year and a half, Alpha and Arcane boxes were about $80 to $100 each. Alpha box is about $5,000 now. Arcane box is $2,500 roughly, and then you got Crucible War boxes at 800. That's a year and a half ago. That's a big return on investment. Now, they were even higher back in May. So if you bought back in May, yeah, you might be a little upset that your price dropped on that. But you also got to consider is crypto dropped. You got other collectibles that dropped in value. Not everything always stays super high. You have fluctuations in the market. So if you got burnt, I understand why you're upset. But also, you buy the dip as well too. And if you're not buying to flip the game and you're buying to stay with it a long time, then you won't be so upset. So, for example, when you go buy a house, you might buy a house at the height of market, but you live in it. And when you live in it, you don't necessarily care about the value if you're not planning on moving out. I say that same mindset goes when you buy into a game. I'm in Flesh and Blood for the long term. I started Flesh and Blood Seattle group back in May of 2021 this year. We had 50 people in our Discord. Now we have 150 people in our group. It's grown at least 50 for Monarch and another 50 for Tails. The player base is super healthy right now. I went to Vegas a few weeks ago and there were about 1,000 people there. Now, people are saying, hey, where are the whales at? Where are the whales at? I'm Salty Whale. I'm still here. You know, I don't buy as much as Saint potentially, but what I gotta say is I put about $50,000 in each set because I fucking love the game. Nothing beats opening a Fable or Legendary. I love cracking packs. I give my extra commons and rares to the local community. I like to donate those cards back. But I love opening packs, so I put a lot of money into the game. Because I love it. And that's what I'm going to say is, when you're investing, is, one, at least from my viewpoint from Flesh and Blood, I can't speak to other games, and this is not financial advice, so take it as you take it. But if you believe in a product, you get more involved in it. So I started as a player. I became a collector. Then I became an advocate of the game. That means I started a community for Seattle and helped grow the area. I wanted more people to play with. But also, the more I played, the more I wanted cold foils. And that same thing goes quite a bit. So if I were to invest in some other game that I don't care about, um, and if I want to flip it, that means you don't have any buy into the game, you don't care about the gameplay, then you're going to feel really bitter that your collection's not worth that much. But at the same time, is the collection's still worth a lot right now. And if you play the game in the community, you're excited about your cards, you're excited to own them, and it's much more better for your health. So if you don't really care about Flesh and Blood, maybe you don't want to invest in it. But if you like the cards, you're in it for the long run, this game is very healthy, I recommend you stick with it. So that's what I want to sum up for my first podcast is I think the game's really healthy. Player base is really growing quite a bit. Cards are still worth a lot more than they were a year ago. So you've made a lot of money if you bought into the game last year. I'm not going to use the word tank. The prices were much higher at one point, but it fluctuated. I think they'll go back up next year, maybe even higher than they were last May. You also have inflation going on. But thanks for listening. Next week, I want to talk more about the cards and tales, the legendaries, fables, and other cold foils and all arts. I want to talk about what's going to be valuable as a collector, and also which cards are really cool for gameplay. Because right now I'm not a 100% investor. I buy a lot, but I also love the game. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.